Welcome, everyone, to the Planning and Development Committee meeting of Wednesday, October 23rd. We have a quorum. I'm calling the meeting to order. The first item we have on our agenda is the approval of regular meeting minutes of October 9th.
Second.
All those in favor of accepting the minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The minutes are passed. The first item we have is P1, granting vacation rental license for 2120 Madison Place.
Move approval.
Do we have any speakers on this? We do have one speaker. Stephen Starr, are you here?
I am.
Yes.
60 seconds. I was here 2 weeks ago on October 9th for the approval of my home at 2120 Madison Place as an Airbnb. At that time, Alderman Nguyen asked me if I would speak directly to my neighbors in attendance and move the agenda item to October 23rd, tonight. I explained to my neighbors that my address is not published publicly on the Airbnb site. My address is given out only to those who have booked a stay with their credit card. I will only accept verified Airbnb guests. A verified guest must provide a government-issued ID card, such as a passport or a driver's license. They must have a working email address and a working telephone number. Additionally, I require my guests to have at least one positive endorsement from a host on Airbnb. I hosted an expanded group of neighbors for a happy hour last night to give them a tour of my home so they could see the specific ways I have arranged my home to ensure security. I am empathic to the need for safety on our block, which is something I desire as well. My intent is to make this endeavor, whether it is short or long-term, that it will not bring any deleterious activity to our block. That's it.
Thank you. Alderman Fisk and then Alderman Rue Simmons.
Thank you. I had one question for you, sir. Are you going to be present when the guests are there, or
Always.
You'll always be on site? And the second thing was for Corporation Council, just to make sure that as an Airbnb, this is subject to the B&B tax that is being considered for 2018.
Good evening, Deputy City Attorney Michelle Mason-Cup. The ordinance for the Airbnb tax will be before you in a few weeks, and if the council approves said tax, then yes, this Airbnb and other rentals will be subject to the tax.
And I'm assuming that includes P2 as well?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Rue Simmons.
I support this. We are doing, residents are having Airbnb all over town. It's a great way to manage and oversee this, so I support it, and I hope that more residents would go through this process to get a rental license.
All right. It's been moved and second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The item passes, so it will move on to the City Council. Item P2 is granting vacation rental license for 1612 Main Street. And do we have any public speakers on this? I don't believe we do.
Move approval.
Second. All those in favor? Any discussion? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The item passes. Would someone mind closing the door in the back so that we have a little bit more quiet? Thank you. All right, the item number P3 is Resolution 82R17 to accept planning staff assistance services delivered by the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning for the 2020 to 2024 Assessment for Fair Housing.
Move approval.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. All right. Now, items P4, Ordinance 115-017, granting a special use for a commercial indoor recreation facility, Spenga, at 1026 Davis Street. This is we have been asked by Alderman Wilson, whose ward this is in, to suspend the rules, introduce, suspend the rules, and then move for action.
Move approval.
Second.
Any discussion?
And obviously grateful that the business has chosen to locate in Evanston, and they want to get going as quickly as possible. So hopefully you can support the suspension of the rules.
Excellent. All those in favor of introducing and suspending the rules and moving for action, please say aye.
Aye.
Can I do it all in one? Thank you. Any opposed? All right, so P4 carries. P5, Ordinance 88017, granting a special use for a Type 2 restaurant, Nick's Organic. My understanding is this has been, there is a request for continuation on the part of the applicant, so we will hold this in committee. Okay. Item P5. Until our next meeting date? Number 13th. Okay, so.
So I move that we hold it until November 13th.
All right, the item has been held. Okay. Now we're on to P6, Ordinance 103017, special use permit for planned development located at 1450 to 1508 Sherman Avenue in the D4 Downtown Transition District. All right. So we have 23 speakers, and I think what we'll do is give everybody a minute and a half. Please remember that if someone else says what you were about to say, or pretty much the gist of what you were going to say, you don't have to repeat it for us. We have all read all the materials. We've read, we watched the videos or attended the Plan Commission, and we have been here present to hear everyone's comment. So we appreciate citizen comment, but we do want to have an opportunity to discuss this as well. So I will start with that. We'll have citizen comment, and then I believe the developer has a presentation, and then we have a citizens group that has a short presentation as well. So the first name I have is Tracy McKeithen, and then Andrew Fisher, Peter Gann, Eric, is it Passett? Yes. Okay, and then Aaron Rosen, if you all could prepare yourselves. All right. Ms. McKeithen?
Good evening. I'm Tracy McKeithen. I am an 8th Ward resident. I'm the Executive Director of Family Promise Chicago North Shore. It's a local homeless agency, nonprofit that serves families in Evanston on the North Shore. I'm also a member of Joining Forces, and which partners with 42 members of the Interfaith Action of Evanston Coalition. Interfaith Action of Evanston is neither in support or against the proposed Albion development. If the development is approved, Interfaith Action of Evanston wants to see the Evanston's Inclusionary Housing Ordinance used to develop as many units of affordable housing as possible. Last week, one of the Interfaith Action of Evanston board members issued a statement supporting a joint proposal from city staff and the Albion developer to use the Inclusionary Housing Ordinance to develop 15 new affordable housing units if the development is approved. In light of the comments from some of the City Council members on October 9th, we would like to urge the City Council to update the AMI rates of the proposed units from 60 to 80% to 50 to 60% of the AMI respectively. The requested change is to address the concerns from council members to make sure that the 15 units are made available to low-income and struggling Evanston residents. Interfaith Action of Evanston looks forward to continuing to work with the City Council to create a city that is inclusive of residents and native Evastonians, regardless of their income level. Thank you.
Next is Andrew Fisher.
Hi, I'm Andrew Fisher. I've been a native of Evanston for the last 50 years when the Rotary Building was just the Valencia Theater. I've been a resident of what's now Optima Towers ever since it was built 12 years ago. One of the main reasons I moved into that building on the 11th floor on the southwest corner was so I could see downtown Chicago was in the Sears Tower just beyond the corner of the Rotary Building. If this current Albion development is built, it will totally block that view. Also, I believe the gist of this you've been told before, but this building would obviously increase the traffic and potential of accidents and accident deaths. and the wind tunnel problem, as well as shadowing the swimming pool on top of the Holiday Inn during the afternoon hours. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Peter Gann.
I'll try to be brief. You all have heard a lot about this already. I just want to say that this developer does not seem like a good fit for this particular site, and that I would personally like to see and would love to be able to propose that we reinvigorate the downtown planning process, which many people participated in several years ago, and that I believe that Evanston is desirable enough that I think we can be proactive. I think we can cultivate the kinds of development that we really want and not accept simply what comes down the road. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Eric.
Aaron.
No, actually, we have an Eric before you. Yes.
Hi, my name is Eric Passons. Most people know I'm the owner of North Shore Apartments and Condos. So as Alderman Rainey asked before the meeting why I would be against this. And I'm not so much against this project. I'm against, as you probably know, there's at least 6 or 7 other rental buildings that are being considered by the council. One tomorrow night that's going to be on Chicago Avenue, and there's a couple other. Being in the business, eat, live, and breathe real estate for the last 25 years, I don't see the demand. Not for 1,500 units that are going to go up. 2, the people who live in the building directly north of the building that you're proposing building, we live through the development of 1717 Ridge, being the building just south of there. I can't tell you how many of our tenants complained about the noise at 7 o'clock in the morning. And because driving girders down into it, the pylons, I can't tell you how many people wanted to move out because of that. This is going to be closer than that. The people who live right above Conseco and what is that, Bar Louie's? Not my building, but I'm just making a point. I think we're going to overheat the whole downtown area by building too many buildings. Maybe this one should go, but what about the next one? There's always a good reason for a developer. A lot of money involved, a lot of profit to be made. I know all about that. But what about the other side of it? That's,
Thank you.
I guess, what I'd like people to consider.
All right, thank you very much. Next is Aaron. And then after Aaron, we have Sari Caddison Shapiro, Paul Barker, Max Overhold, and Trish Connolly. Yes, go ahead.
Good evening. My name is Aaron Rosen, and I live about 1,000 feet west of the proposed Albion project. I see that the developers of the Albion have chosen to not let the perfect be the enemy of the good and have compromised on the size of the project. I hope they will secure the simple majority they need to proceed, and I am pleased by this prospect, because as a community, we cannot sit in stasis or move the clock backwards in time. The Albion project is an attractive building with a human-scaled podium, a well-articulated residential tower with green space, and it adds residents to the area. The businesses nearby need these new neighbors to survive and thrive in the new retail landscape of America. So let me be clear how I think the lines are drawn on your vote tonight. A vote against this project is a vote against good, sustainable urban design, and a vote to increase regional sprawl. Given the affordable units proposed for the inclusion in the project itself, a vote against this project is a vote against truly integrated affordable housing, and a vote to maintain the segregated status quo. A vote against this project is a vote against the basic principles of transit-oriented development, and a vote for the car culture, higher per capita energy spending, and climate change absenteeism. Lastly, a vote against this project is a vote against the economic interests of all of the small businesses who operate and the taxpayers who reside in this community, and a vote for higher property taxes and more derelict storefronts downtown. I urge you to consider the future well-being of downtown Evanston and vote to allow Albion to proceed with their planned development. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Sari Caddison Shapiro.
My name's Sari Caddison Shapiro. That's okay. And I live 500 feet from there on the corner of Lake and Elmwood. I think to proceed with this without a traffic study is insane. since the very narrow alley that Albion wants to use for the entrance to their building is too narrow for moving trucks, delivery trucks, fire trucks. And their solution is to make it one way. So if it's one way, all the traffic going to that building, almost 300 apartments, is going by my house. And they also are talking about 300 more apartments in the 30-story one. I mean, I think the people who have lived here for decades and paid property taxes for decades didn't really sign on to live in the loop. And it's getting to be like just fill the place with high-rises if the developers want to do it. And I think we have desirable land. We have talented people who have a feeling for Evanston. And I think the lot is not designed for that shape of building. It's shoehorned in there. I'm a designer. I've been a designer for 40 years. I've worked at ABC. It's not a good-looking building. It's outsized and takes up almost an entire block. It's not bad to have some slow, thoughtful development instead of just developer-driven development when they don't have a feeling for Evanston.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Next, we have Paul Barker, and then Max Overholt after that.
My name is Paul Barker. I live at 1630 Main Street, and I get angry every time I open the Evanston Roundtable. And I find a glitzy color rendering of some proposed architectural behemoth presented as a fait accompli. And I realize that this is not a news article, but an advertisement in disguise. Yet again, a small group of men in expensive suits with capital smoldering in their pockets smell an opportunity for profiting at my town's expense and are hoping to slip it past me. Why do I always learn about these plots at the 11th hour? Is the bulldozer power of wealth about to destroy more of the humble human scale places familiar to my internal landscape of home? Developers are organized, patient, devious, determined, and rich, sniffing out opportunities and finding ways around city ordinances designed to protect us from their greed is their full-time job. Some citizens, like myself, have full-time jobs, families to raise, limited funds, and little spare time. This is not a fair fight. What is supposed to even the odds are you, our elected representatives. Will you protect us from the exploitation of rich investors looking to make themselves richer? Can't we keep our priorities straight? We don't need more glass and steel monstrosities. We need affordable housing. We need
Mr.
equitable
Barker.
education for our children
4 seconds.
and for the next generation. As long as there's one homeless family struggling to cobble together a decent life, as long as there's one hungry kid in our schools, shouldn't we be telling developers like Albion and Farpoint, thanks but no thanks? We got more important matters to address.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, Max Overholt. Max Overholt.
Good evening. Good evening, Alderman. I would like to speak in opposition to this project, and while I can understand why that particular part of Sherman Avenue is in need of a facelift, I think a high-rise building like what is being proposed is not appropriate for that particular area. We have more than enough of these buildings in the downtown area to go around, and do we really need any more of these grandiose development? Please, I would urge you to vote against this because I think that it will not have the desired results that those in favor are hoping for. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Trish Connolly. Then I think it's Meg Wellen and Chris Pappas, Janet Larson. Okay, go ahead.
Hello, I'm Trisha Connolly. I live at 908 Greenwood, and I'm within 1,000 feet of the Albion project. Tonight, I'd like to just remind everyone that This is a multi-billion-dollar corporation. They have money. And they're telling you that they can only afford to put in 15 units. I hope you've done the research. They can give us 10%. And I think it sends a really bad message if we're willing to say, okay, that's good, that's a feel-good for us. Let's do the real good work, and let's be about middle class and people struggling to get places and get this going in the 4th Ward, in the 1st Ward, in the 7th Ward, and so forth. Thank you.
Thank you. Is it Meg Welsh?
Hi, Meg Welch has given me her time.
Okay. And have you also signed up?
Yes.
Okay. And
no, I haven't.
Oh.
No, sorry. No,
All
I
right.
haven't.
Okay.
I'm taking Meg Welch's spot. Here's what I don't like about this.
And can you just give us your name? We need to put the
No.
record.
Here's what I don't like about, I feel like some of you have been.
It's our rules that we have.
My name is Holly Stratton, and one of you, and I don't think that this should be allowed under any circumstances, no matter what. I don't think an alderman should tell a constituent, "F you," which is what my alderman, Thomas Suffredin, said to me. I don't like the way the people of Evanston have been bullied, berated.
excuse me.
No, I don't like the way we've been bullied and berated by some of you into accepting this project. And that's what it feels like. Bullying and berating. One of you used the term false facts. That sounds like Kellyanne Conway from the Trump administration.
I used it. It was me.
That shouldn't be happening. No, that's not right. And I'd like to know what y'all have to say for yourselves.
Thank you. Next, we have Chris Pappas, then Janet Larson, and then I believe it's Will White.
Good evening. My name is Chris Pappas, and I'm the owner of Igia Spa across the street from the proposed development. I'm here to express two concerns I have with the proposed building. And my concerns, and I tried to keep these unique, fall into two major categories. First are the detrimental impacts on parking for clients and employees. This past summer has already been incredibly challenging from a parking perspective. Simultaneous road construction on Chicago Avenue, Sherman Avenue, and the closure at the same time of the parking facility in the Rotary International Building combined to make it a near impossibility for my clients and employees to find parking. With the proposed facility being constructed right across the street from us, and with a construction period lasting 2 years, I'm extremely concerned as a small business owner at having my clients and employees adversely impacted with yet another, apparently more significant parking challenge. We have a wonderful business with a reputation we've worked hard to earn, but I expect that our clients' inability to access our facility for 2 years due to adversely impacted parking availability would be devastating for our business. My second concern has to do with the noise impact from the construction that will adversely impact the quiet and calm spa environment to which our spa clients have become accustomed and which they expect.
Mr. Pappas, could you wrap up in 10 seconds?
A significant number of our rooms are on the side that's affected, and the noise could be devastating. And I just ask you to vote no.
Thank you. Next, we have Janet Larson, then Will White, and then Thomas Klein and Carl Klein.
I'm Janet Larson. I've lived here since 1972, and currently I'm at 1501 Oak Avenue, which is the location of the former City Hall. I have a question. Will the city hire additional building inspectors? The condo I live in apparently didn't have a conscientious one, according to several plumbers who have been called in to address problems related to installation and choices of material. The other concern I have, as someone who has done a lot of canvassing for elections with poll sheet in hand, I've noticed that as the size of the rental building increases, there are fewer registered voters, and they are more transient and less likely to participate in community affairs of importance. Lastly, I haven't had a car since 1998. If this project goes through, I sure hope the people renting these units don't either. We have no idea how successful the Elmwood project will be before going to another building that has limited parking space. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Will White. Yes, Mr. White.
Yes, thank you.
Mr. White, could you hold for one moment?
Surely.
Yes.
Could I just say that Janet Larson's spouse, Norris Larson, used to be my seatmate. He was the 8th Ward alderman, and just a wonderful person.
Thank you. Yes, go ahead, Mr. White.
My name is Will White, and I live at 1501 Oak. I've been an Evanston resident for the last 42 years. 6 kids went through ETHS, and so I have a lot of commitment to this town. I live within 1,000 feet of the proposed building, and I firmly oppose its construction for a number of reasons you've been hearing from some other very passionate people. You have heard honest and passionate opposition from many of your constituents, and I hope that you have been listening. It's been said that this is a done deal. The council and the mayor and the developer has this all worked out, and so we'll just walk through this and that'll be it. I don't like to think it could be that way, but I didn't like to think Donald Trump could be president either. And he is. So we appreciate your concern about Evanston's financial condition, but sometimes visionary leadership is just needed to look past easy bucks. I'm not just against this project because it's progressive. I'm against it because I don't think it's well planned enough. I don't think it's thoroughly vetted, and I don't think it's code legal. I think it's your job, your responsibility, I submit, Madam Chairman, is to serve the people who elected you and vote a firm, flat, non-negotiable no.
Thank you. Now we have Thomas Klein, and then after that is Carl Klein, Matt Rogers, and Gita Tanner. So if everyone could be ready. Yes. Mm-hmm.
My name is Thomas Klein. I live in the 3rd Ward. I agree with my alderperson's statement that this particular project has in part to do with the price of land. I understand from one of the Albion personnel that the price of land may be as much as $8.5 million. The gentleman also suggested that for his, what another person correctly said, is a very well-endowed holding company behind it, but that nonetheless his company could only afford to provide 29 units, affordable housing units, if the sale of the price of land was half what it reportedly currently is. But even if all 29 affordable housing units were provided, a structure as massive as 286 units would not only be ecologically and economically and in terms of Illinois tort law having to do with nuisance wrong. 286 units is wrong because it's zoned for 93, and it's zoned for 93 to avoid producing a common law nuisance situation. There are public and private nuisance cases. Expect to have them if this gets built.
10 more seconds, please.
Yes. I'm most concerned that the process that's brought this before you has been flawed. The project was not properly vetted in Plan Commission, and I have put in the document the title of this book called Municipal Building and Zoning Code Enforcement Best Practices. The distinguished city attorney of Glendale, Arizona, Craig
Thank you, Mr.
T.
Klein.
Tyndall, is the editor. We need to enforce our code, especially our zoning code.
Next, we have Carl Klein.
Right. Good evening. This proposed mega development really diminishes the value of property in the neighborhood. Increased congestion and infusion of ugly, non-conforming, bulky, out-of-scale buildings tend to detract from the fair market value of surrounding residences. So I'm just asking, please, can we just take a deep breath and think about what is our vision for Evanston? Maybe we should suspend the incessant onslaught of developments for a while so we can address how we feel about the increased population density, which will no doubt increase the already congested traffic downtown and also increase the rent, which is reducing the affordability and increasing the cost of housing and cost of living in downtown. And then on another note, it says here, in the Downtown District Plan Development Information Sheet found on City of Evanston website, here it says, the zoning ordinance prohibits the approval of a variation in combination with the planned development, Section 6-3-5-9B. The city only may grant exceptions to the requirements of the zoning ordinance within the context of the planned development approval. I've also read the Planned Development 1450 Sherman Ordinance, and it's my understanding that Albion Residential is asking for a variation outside of the planned unit development process. So that would be violating city codes, so I think that's grounds for saying no to Albion. Thank you.
Thank you. Matt Rogers. And then after Matt, we'll have Gita Tanner, Sarah Shawstock, Greg Williams.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of council. Matt Rogers, I live at 133 Clyde Avenue, and I am the former chairman of the Zoning Board of Appeals, served on the zoning board for 10 years. I don't really have a dog in this fight. I didn't intend to speak on this either for or against it, but I'm very bothered by some of the discussions that I've heard. It is true that there is a 2009 downtown plan that was adopted by City Council. City Council did not adopt zoning to back up that, therefore making that document pretty much unenforceable and making it more like our comprehensive general plan, which is more of a guide than something that can be held to by bodies. I'm also bothered by the fact that I continually hear that things aren't properly vetted before our citizen committees. It's an excellent opportunity for voices to be heard, for discussion to be had. This bothered me when I was zoning board chair and things would come to this council after we had heard it, and all of a sudden a new side of the story is being told or something like that. I would ask you to act based upon the process that you have put in place. If you don't feel it's a good process, I would ask you to change that process, but I ask you not to change the rules on people halfway through their proposals moving through the city council process. Thank you.
Thank you. Gita Tanner.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, members of the City Council.
My name is Geeta Tanner. I grew up in Evanston in the 60s and 70s, fell in love with the city, and so returned with my husband and to raise our children. We live on Washington Street near Dewey. I'm here to represent Evanstonians who are in support of development on the 1500 block of Sherman, but not in support of the Albion high-rise. We ask that you approve development that plans for human scale, which will establish an appropriate transition from adjacent neighborhoods to downtown. Instead of a high-rise and one long mass of a structure on the ground level, we are asking for a variety of facades no higher than 4 or 5 levels. High-rise buildings like the Albion detract from the pedestrians' connection to local architecture. They erase a sense of character, block sunlight, and create wind tunnels. We want a downtown Evanston that offers intimacy and inclusion from its building development rather than the intense, impersonal feelings one receives when downtown Chicago, say. Architecture is like music. They both have the power to evoke great feeling, and both can put a spring in our steps. Please vote no.
Thank you. Next, we have Sarah Shastok. Then after that is Greg Williams, and then Irv Choka.
Good evening. I remember being here when you were talking about the downtown plan a couple of weeks ago, and it seemed to me that there was little enthusiasm in some parts of the council for that conversation or interest in using that plan for any kind of guidance. But here we are tonight with many speakers about this particular project. There were already several other projects when you last talked about this, such as the Northlight development on Sherman, north of Church. As now there are 2 new ones that have sprung up like little mushrooms after the rain, the active seniors housing on Oak, and a new proposal for yet another tower on Chicago Avenue. It seems to me it is really not an option whether or not you want to deal with the downtown plan. I think you must deal with the downtown plan. We need to have some kind of baseline for residents, for the council, for developers, so that we're not all spinning our wheels and spending time on things when there may be some standards that we should be following as a community. So I urge you to go back to that, find the parts that you all agree on, find the parts that need discussion, and let's go back to that effort where so much has been invested already. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Next is Greg. Good evening, Mr. Williams.
Thank you for holding Sherman Avenue in committee last meeting, and I strongly recommend that you continue to demand that this project be modified to conform more explicitly with city zoning. The developers made major changes to the project submitted just last Thursday, which is inappropriate, including an attempt to correct the ground floor plan according to valid logistical criticisms. While more time is needed to review it, a quick review finds that there are many more real problems with this latest revision. Trucks can't possibly get into the loading berths. The alley's too short, narrow. And the actual loading from the back of the trucks and getting to the residential elevators is not possible at all. And this new hallway to the elevators is not possible, has no headroom because of the parking ramp, which would have to be 24% to clear the hallway. The retail trash room is still too small. There would be dumpsters in the alley. The north retail space, both the loading and the trash, must now cross the residential lobby. There is still no residential retail parking, even though 25 retail parking spaces are required. The plan obviously is endeavoring to minimize the available retail, since we're all concerned about empty retail. It's incredible that in a 37,000 square foot floor plan, there's now only 6,800 square feet of retail.
10 more seconds, please.
There was previously 3 small spaces, now there are only 2. The fact is that this committee here needs to be more discerning and understanding of the impact of these buildings. There's no strength of assistance from the city agencies. The DAPR review is just a marshmallow picnic, and the Plan Commission is worthless, I'm sorry to say. As an experienced professional, I find this submittal to be substandard and not suitable for this site.
Thank you. Now we have Irv. Yes. Hi, Mr. Choker. After Irv will be Dan Neumann, then Diane Thotis.
Hi, my name is Irv Chokel. We've been residents here in Evanston for over 40 years. We didn't move into Evanston because it looks like downtown Chicago, and that's the direction we're going in. At the last meeting 2 weeks ago, several aldermen or a couple of aldermen expressed an interest in this property because of the benefits. Do we need all of these benefits and from one development? Can't we get along with fewer benefits and fewer extreme zoning variances? Are these benefits worth the precedent that we're setting with allowing extreme variances from our zoning ordinance? Let these developers go back to the drawing board and come up with something that's not so extreme in variance from our zoning.
Thank you. Next, we have Dan Neumann.
Hi, good evening. I am a current resident of Evanston. I've been one for 40 years. I'm in the 6th Ward now. My priority for Evanston is transparency, a democratic process, and one where all the groups of Evanston are represented. I'm a high school teacher, and to do my job well, I need to have strong connections with all students, and that started here in Evanston for me. So I guess this Albion project is part of an interest of affordable housing and housing that's representative for all economic and racial backgrounds of our city and our country. Since 2008 and the housing crisis, hundreds of black families have had to leave Evanston, and I want to know what this body is planning to do to address that. Why would we miss this opportunity with almost nearly 300 units to not make it a priority to ensure that our community is committed to what it was when I grew up here, when I came up here in my youth. And just looking at the median income for Black and Latino families, it's just this whole approach to this development, to me, has the wrong priorities. So I'm going to urge you to vote no, and thank you for your time.
Mr. Neumann, we wanted to make sure you understood that that the developer is not planning to, the developer will be complying with the federal fair housing laws. So anyone of any race, creed, color can live in this building. So we want to make sure.
That may be the law, but I want to make sure that Evanston is truly committed to making that law a reality for more Black and Latino residents.
Evanston does make sure we don't support any building that violates the fair housing law, and I want to make sure that goes on record, so that Evanston has been a strong supporter. You may not believe it, but we have been.
Okay.
All right. Next is Diane Thotis. Then we have Alex Block, and the last one is Tina Stevenson.
Yes, I'm a resident long-term Evanston, lived here about 45 years, from when I was 7. And I've seen a lot of changes, and right now we're living in a very crisis moment. I don't need to say that. Every day, everywhere, we read about the interests of very wealthy persons in our culture versus the needs of working people, the middle class, and the poor who make up our communities. It is about the neoliberal privatization of public spaces and places, public money, and the public good. It's the 1% versus the 99%. This 270-unit monstrous project is the perfect point in case of this situation. First, the increase of land value in Evanston from these mega buildings will have a tremendous negative effect on the long term on Evanstonians who have lived here for so long, from a time when the working class and middle class could afford to stay here. The claim of the $2 million in taxes is a wash. They are merely the crumbs that we will get compared to the bonanza that these multi-million dollar developers will be getting as a lot of it giveaway, that they will be awarded for building as big a building as they could possibly greedy do.
10 more seconds.
We're getting San Francisco'd in the gutting of local communities and culture, pushing us out. The developer's more interested in maximizing profits than listening to us. He could be less greedy, but will he? I think that's going to be up to you. Evanstonians did not sign on to be run roughshod over such a massively unfit plan. With no consideration of our thoughts, we've tried so hard to get this body elected to be more progressive, to be city representatives in the last election.
Thank you.
I'll say it, as I said before, we're watching how you vote tonight, and which side are you on?
Thank you. Next is Alex Block, and then Tina Stevenson, and then we are completed.
Alex is trying to get here. He's running late, so he asked me to read a statement on his behalf. I'm Claire Kelly, and I'm reading on behalf of Alex Block. Tonight's discussion is not about pro-development versus anti-development. It's really a discussion about good development versus bad development, and the Albion proposal is a bad development. The least privileged communities have been sold the same bag of baloney for centuries. They're told big high-rise developments by for-profit developers will bring tax dollars to the city, spur growth, and lift all boats with the rising tide. But history disproves this argument. Optima Towers didn't solve our budget crisis. The Maine hasn't diversified the Third Ward, and the Albion sure won't provide homes to those who need it most. The council should not fall for the same old shtick, while developers make away like bandits, and communities are left behind wondering what went wrong. But here's what went wrong. Developments like these are never about building better communities. They're about maximizing profits. We shouldn't be a city where major corporations eat up real estate while skating around affordable housing laws. That's antithetical to everything we want to stand for. This is not a city that needs a corporate bailout. It's a city that needs political courage. And it's a city that wants this council to vote no on the Albion. Thank you.
Tina Stevenson.
Hi.
Hi.
I live in the 5th Ward, and I just want to say that I came to Evanston because it's a diverse community with mixed income people. And I feel it's really wrong to build this huge Albion development with only 15 units for low-income people. And I agree with a lot of what's been said, that hundreds of families have been driven out of Evanston, not because they're African American, but because they're low income. Who are we going to support? The low income families, or are we going to be supporting billionaires coming in with these developments? I think you should all vote against the Albion. Thank you.
That concludes public comment. So now we will have a presentation from the developer about changes that have been made since our last meeting.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Can you pull up our presentation?
Mr. Yule, how much time do you anticipate?
10 minutes max.
All right, thank
Is that
you.
good?
Mm-hmm. Should we turn off the lights?
Upper right. There you go.
Mm-hmm. Hold on.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. So, we take very seriously everything that we hear, and there's been a lot of public comment. There's been a lot of feedback through the whole process. We've had neighborhood group meetings, multiple DAPR meetings, multiple planning commission meetings, and now multiple commission meetings here committee meetings before we move forward, if we move forward. And we take every comment that we hear very seriously. Can I use the button? Cool. What's the next? Where do I go next? Just down. There we go. So I wanted to start, Donna Pugh, our zoning attorney, typically does our relief section, but I wanted to do it. I wanted to talk about what happened here. So we came to the meeting 2 weeks ago, and we heard a lot of comment, and we said, okay, let's go back and sit down and digest some of that comment. How can we handle that comment? And what came about is that we decided to reduce the building by a floor. And that took a whole floor out of the building, as we have an adjusted model that's here on display today, which keeps the building more in scale in line with the Holiday Inn across the street and dramatically lower than the Rotary building just north of the project. With this, that's reduced our height to 145 feet, excluding the parking floors, and it's reduced our FAR to 5.99. And what that's done is it's really tightened up the building. We've decreased unit count by 13 units over the last 2 weeks, and we have not maintained any change in other affordable housing units that we've had so far. In terms of the ziggurat setback, we heard you, we listened, and we tried to. It's such a unique site. It's a trapezoidal site that makes it very difficult for us to make the site work. So we're maintaining a ziggurat setback that's now pulled off the lot line. We got it back 5 feet from the very tip of the south, and then it gently curves to its 40-foot part, which goes for majority of the site across. As you can see, our continued progression. Where did we start? So in May, we started at 298 units. We started with a building that was 27 feet taller, which is just about 3 floors. We started with an FAR, which was almost a whole point higher, and we started with 28 less parking stalls. So I think this shows our progression, who we are. We are a little bit different. We're not coming here every single meeting saying to this council, saying to the Planning Commission, saying to anyone that this is it. This is the way it has to be. Where we're at today and where we believe that this project is still feasible is a project that is within zoning regulations with development allowances that are granted, other than ziggurat setback and MLA. And MLA, being a density count, is just a function of the economy that we're in. This is not an economy to build condo projects. And so what we do as a living, what we study, what we understand is multifamily housing. And we have studies, and we just met with a great, brilliant man, Tracy Cross, who studies all of the multifamily market, and said that this Evanston marketplace, this project that we have in our unit mix, is very efficient for this particular project. What I want to do is have Paul Alessandro, our architect, walk you through the elevations, and then come back and we'll talk a little bit about some of those quick changes at the ground level that we had. Just roll a little bit.
Good evening. As Andrew indicated, we have reduced the building height by a floor at the top. We've also made some subtle changes at the front, eliminating that large open area and the height of the columns there that were exposed. In addition to bringing the building down, this corner here has been pushed back. We've smoothed out the curve a little bit in order to provide more clearance at the front edge. The two end elevations are similar, looking to what they are other than the height that we have changed. You can see at this location at the front facing south, that large opening again is gone and now is enclosed as a residential area. The rear elevation is also the same. We've expanded the loading dock, and the loading dock trucks will be able to drive down the alley back into this loading dock and then continue on their way out. And then we've also isolated the entrance for cars and separated them from the loading and trash delivery. And then you wanted to speak?
Yeah. So then as we get back to the first floor, I think it's important, again, we take these things seriously. Mr. Williams, he was here last week and he actually provided us with an email about rearranging what the first floor looks like. And, I look at it and said, okay, maybe we can get a little bit more detail. We're in the schematic stage today. These are not the finished drawings. There's a dapper proceeding that continues to go on with the project. But what we did is we studied it and we said, how can we help the flow? And how can we increase the viability of Sherman Avenue? What we did is we took away a retail space. We have a restaurateur who is was here last week. It was Prairie Moon that wants to be in that restaurant space. It's a very viable size for him. It's a very viable location for him. He has location on Sherman. He has an opening that opens up to an outdoor terrace. And then we have a service-based retail space, which we've had several conversations with people who would take it tomorrow. They're very interested in it. So we said we can reduce the amount of exposure from the community feedback of storefronts and vacancies. We know that these can be rented immediately while providing a lobby experience for our residents that flow into both spaces. They can be open and they can move back and forth. We've been able to increase the parking on the first floor. Overall, we got that parking count up and over 200 stalls now, which no longer requires a variance for the project. That coupled with the reduction of units. And we feel that this flow naturally, it works for what we do. It has multiple trash rooms, and it has the ability for deliveries to be made. We'll have a full-time concierge who's there, who manages that process every day with a book and has the ability for trucks to back in and circulates between residential and retail loading as it's going on. As we go up through the floor.
Mr. Yule, we have a question from Alderman Fisk.
Sure.
Can you tell me how the truck driver has access from the loading zone into the 2 retail spaces?
Yeah, there'll be a man. It's not showing. There'll be a man door. So they're showing 3 3 parking spaces today to the far left of the diagram. So where those 3 trucks are, you see the 100?
Yes.
Okay. So
Do you have a little
I don't.
thing?
That's why.
Okay.
I do. I lied. There we go. So these 3 right here. We will be managing that system. Never will we. Code here requires 3 loading docks. Never with any of the projects we have done, we've ever had 3 loading trucks in a project at one time. This will be managed by our concierge. So as a retail delivery is occurring for the restaurant, that truck will come up into the alley, and then it'll do a 3-point turn back. There'll be an area there for them to unload. There'll be a man door to walk into this corridor. That corridor will have a door into the retail shop. If they are coming to move into the building, then they'll be coming into our move-in corridor. They'll come down, they'll move into our corridor, and they'll come into our move-in lobby and enter the freight elevator, which goes up and down.
All right. Now, are you saying that this retail space, the 2,000 square foot retail space, is no longer there?
No, it's there. So that space, so you would, if that space requires a loading truck, we see it as a small-based, service-based retail. If it does have a loading truck, something that's coming in, they would get dropped off, and it would go right through this. This is still part of the corridor. It would come right through this corridor behind the back and enter the space.
Okay, so the purple shaded...
yeah, it's just showing that that's kind of a blend of the lobby right inside there.
Okay,
yes.
all right.
And again, these are still going to be worked through more in finite detail as we go through the project.
All right, because the one thing I don't want to see, especially for that small retail
Street
space,
loading.
is anyone parking on the street,
Totally agree with
trucks
you.
unloading.
Absolutely. Understood. As we continue to go up, we flip-flop to where the club room's located with the grilling stations. Unit mix stays similar. And something I wanted to point out here, there's actually an error in this, but what I wanted to point out here is our square footages are a little bit larger. So our studio square footages are in the above 500 square foot range. There's been a lot of talk about micro apartments. These are not micro apartments. These are studios that are very sizable in size. These are studios you would find in Chicago. They are not compact. They have full-size appliances. They have full-size islands. They have everything that's normal into an apartment project that you would see built today. And convertibles are actually at 650 square feet average. The 1-bedrooms are nearing 800, and the 2-bedrooms are over 1,000. This is a very classic unit mix that's being used in the marketplace today that's successful.
It says 550.
It's 650. I apologize. And then we get to the top level. Fitness center will be overlooking the lake from that top level up there with a pool at the deck. So not much has changed in terms of the building itself. We have updated landscaping plans that just show the correlation of where the landscaping is now with the appropriate retail and entry place locations. And we have the Pocket Park Garden plan continuing to be updated every single day as we get more feedback of how it's going to work and operate. And what I want to just leave this with is, and, in terms of the community benefits, something else that we heard very closely was, what are the community benefits? Is there room to move the community benefits? Is there room to adopt, different ideas and initiatives? And the answer is yes. What I just highlighted here is a few that we were working with staff and going in a direction, but we're open to different ideas. We've been informed from staff that there's a young entrepreneurship program that is something of interest. It's definitely of interest to us. This would be a full union building. So, if that's a program that can integrate together in some form, it's definitely something that we would look at doing. And what we didn't get a lot of time to talk about was the training program. And our training program is a series of 18 months that we're working with Shelley Gates in the geometry and construction program. And we're going there and we're helping teach classes. We're bringing the students to our job site and we're helping them understand real life construction. And not only construction, but architecture, horticulture, as there'll be a lot of green space in this building. And the opportunity to learn in an environment that is conducive to the future. A lot of times you just read this in a book and someone asks you to do something. We've done this in Pittsburgh, in the Pittsburgh Public Schools District, and it was very successful. The students would get dropped off at the site. They would show up at the site, and we would bring in our general contractor. They'd be dressed in their attire that they wear every single day. They would talk about their life, and the questions would come, what does it mean to be in the union? What are union benefits? How much training do you have? And the kids would rapid fire questions as the construction employees would answer them, and it was very fundamental, but it's an experience that you don't get every day as a student. So we're committed to an 18-month program of exchanging classroom back and forth to make sure that we put a schedule together with Shelley to ensure success in that program. That's all we have for our updates. We just wanted to update for the record the changes in the building.
Okay. Thank you.
Chairman, can I just make a comment, please?
Well, we have concluded our citizen comment.
I understand, but whenever you're asking for variances like this, you ask for more than you're willing to settle for. Now they're coming back to what they really want. And they've also...
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We all corrected design
that.
errors that were in the previous plans.
Thank you. Okay. Now, my understanding from Ms. Kelly is that there's going to be a presentation.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. And we are actually going to start our presentation by hearing from some longstanding small businesses in the area. That we hear quite a bit about the need to bring density to these businesses that we, in the form of, very large building here. And we're going to hear from a 30-year business owner, a 20-year business owner, and a 15-year business owner that we think really these are a reflection of Evanston and the independent businesses we want and we love, and they love us. So we're going to watch that.
Ms. Kelly, this is approximately 10 minutes?
I think it's 15. Oh, no, there's just very short. Yeah. Thank you. Well, 3 minutes. This is 3 minutes. Is it not working? Oh, that's a shame. Well, that's Kathy Pappas. She is one of the owners of Aegea, and she's been there for 20 years. It's a spa that has gotten accolades locally and nationally.
Ms. Kelly,
yes.
Chris Pappas just spoke during the...
Great. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is covered anymore, but they are... They love it here. Her perspective might have been a little different. They love the residential aspect of it. They love being here. She's a Northwestern graduate, got married at the Orrington Hotel. Huge fan of Evanstonians in Evanston. And she is very concerned about this development, that they think really their business might be compromised to the point of closing. Anyway, we can go to the next one just to see their pictures. And I'd love to send these to you. I'm sorry that we're having trouble. Okay. The next one is Eve. The name escapes me, of her jewelry store. Affile. She is from Paris, and she has a business. She's been in Evanston for 30 years, and she chose this area because it reminded her of Paris, and she really likes. She's made this her home for 30 years, and she is not against development at all, or not against density, but the size and the scale and the continuation of the building, kind of like a monolith wall, she's very concerned about and thinks that it will change the entire feeling of the area. And next is Elisabeth Hines, and she owns Wellspring Health. She's been here for 20 years on Sherman Avenue, and she too believes in Evanston and speaks so highly, but she has been compromised by her customers, really have issues with finding parking, and sometimes are late, and she feels like it is compromising her business, and she really says she's on the brink of deciding whether or not she's going to stay downtown. Also, there's two other people that weren't shown in the video, but two other businesses said that they may consider leaving because it's not what they had in mind. So I'm sorry these videos didn't work. So I will hand it over to, let's see, do I have a clicker? We can go to, I'll read the statement. Yeah. We can start there, and I'll just go to slide 2. Okay, and so we've heard, there's been major changes here, and sort of the assumption is that, everything's fine in terms of the zoning. So here's a statement from former ZBA Chairman Seth Weinberger, and it's, here it is. The revised Albion proposal does not change the fundamental issue that the proposed building is too massive for the block it's being proposed for. It is still 35 feet too close to the street on the southern end of the building. It's triple the height of what's contemplated in the downtown plan, and I know we've talked a lot about that, but the downtown plan is on the website as an adopted plan, and it's supposed to be the guiding document. By making just enough changes to eliminate a supermajority vote, Albion continues to demonstrate its reluctance to do anything except the absolute minimum required to get approval with no true regard for public interest. So there are still 4 allowances. It still requires 4 allowances in this D4 transition district. So I will stop talking now, and we will go on to a closer look at the public benefits. Thank you.
Thanks. Hello, everyone. I'm John Moore. I'm a City of Evanston resident, and I'm really happy to be here tonight. Just want to take 1 second to talk about the claimed public benefits here for the project. And Can you advance it? There we go. Great. So many of the benefits that are claimed here are not true public benefits, and they're really offering very little in the way of inducements relative to the really significant zoning relief that they're requesting from the city. And accepting these kinds of inducements as public benefits would really set a very low and unacceptable bar and dangerous precedent in all future projects. So we really want you to think very carefully about that as you look at the benefits. First of all, next slide, please. Thank you. Public benefits under the city code are supposed to benefit the city and the neighborhood together. Many of these benefits that are claimed don't really fall under any of the categories of public benefits under 6.3 to 6.3 of the city code. I think it's, we really encourage you to look at that section in detail and see how the benefits stack up against that. Next slide. Some of the benefits are benefits that are actually amenities masquerading as benefits. Things like the divvy membership for the residents, the transit tracker, and the car share programs. Those are great, the ones that are for the residents, but they don't really benefit the city or the public generally at all. They're great for the city, not for the public. And then second, there are other benefits, these one-time benefits, large payments. We've heard a little more of that tonight. They're great, but they have no real lasting impact for the public and the neighborhood. They're one-time benefits, and then they expire. The building is here for decades and decades, and they've gone by the wayside. So what's left in all of this are things like the LEED certification, the silver LEED certification, are relatively minor in impact and have very little in value relative to the significant zoning relief that the developer is asking for you tonight. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Leslie McMillan. I'm a 25-year resident of Evanston, and I also am a banker for 25 years and have worked with a lot of developers in commercial lending as well as ultra-high net worth. I wanted to talk specifically about the finances of the project and talk more directly about the company Albion's request to do below the 10% guideline on the affordable housing. As you can see, the economics are outlined above, and what the company is asked to do is reduce down to 15 units, which in essence would guarantee them a cap rate of 5.8 or an IRR of 17.8%. My question to the council is, why on earth are we going to do something like that? Why do we need to guarantee them such a large return? The 10-year bonds at 2.5%. If you look at equities, you're lucky to get 7 to 8% on a year-over-year basis. So locking in this sort of profitability really seems unfair to me, and it looks as though what we're trying to do is really sort of subsidize their returns at the expense of our most underprivileged population. If the returns don't work and the metrics don't work for this as a result of them having to provide more fair housing, I guess my question is maybe Evanston can't really support a luxury building. And if you do lower this now, if you go below the 10% threshold, you're probably setting a ceiling. If we go to 7 or 8%, in all likelihood, once the bell has been rung, it's hard to unring it. Every single developer will be up here asking for the same sorts of concessions. So I would just ask you absolutely to consider that. And there are other proposals out there that have already offered to do the 10%. And just as an aside, looking at the metrics that they're at the lowest level where they are providing all 29 units, just a wide survey today of commercial lenders that I know said, without knowing what the advance rates or the rent rolls are, at 5.4 and a cap rate, or 5.4 cap rate and a 13.1% IRR, there's a lot of deals out there getting done at that level. This is simply that the general partners and the limited liability partners want a bigger bang for their buck. So I would encourage you, if you do move forward with this project, to at a minimum, make sure they do the 10%.
I'm Meg Welch, Fourth Ward resident. So I'm going to talk about the Albion Affordable Housing Ordinance doesn't respect our ordinances, our Plan Commission, our needs. Can I have the next slide? I'd like to just remind you what happened on 9/13/2017, the Plan Commission, what they approved. The Commission recommended approval of the plan development with conditions recommended by staff and the additional conditions below. Please notice what's in red. Their approval was conditional on addition of affordable units by households at 50 to 60% of AMI. And that's consistent with our inclusionary housing ordinance. It's important to remember that this plan is in a transit-oriented development. It's in a TOD area. Can I have the next slide? So here's the inclusionary housing ordinance asks for fee in lieu payment into the Affordable Housing Fund, 10% units, in a TOD at 50 to 60%. Joining forces are affordable housing people, broad cross-section of our community that has worked on affordable housing, requested to require at least 15 affordable units and payment into the Affordable Housing Fund. The Plan Commission, as we just saw, approved with the condition of 50 to 60% AMI. So what we have now, though, that's been glossed over is we've been told this is an alternative equivalent proposal, 15 units of affordable housing. But notice it's at 60 to 80% of AMI. 8 units are at 80% of AMI. That is not what is in the Affordable Inclusionary Housing Ordinance for a transit-oriented development. We can't find this. Where is this included? Can I have the next slide? So our affordable mix of 60 to 80% lends itself more. This is a quote from a communication between the city and Albion. Lends itself more to rent-controlled, quote, affordable workforce housing, not as much to subsidized government housing. So what does this mean? Will Albion help the target group ID'd by the city and advocacy groups? Seems like they don't want to. They're saying this, they're not targeting that. Have the next slide. So the Albion development, even if they complied with everything in the Inclusionary Housing Ordinance, will have a net negative effect on rental housing affordability and diversity in Evanston. So because the luxury rate rents in the Albion development will contribute to further increase of average rents for families. And there was an article that was scoffed at, and quotes were cherry-picked that, this article actually, supports building luxury developments. It actually doesn't. It says that such developments will only benefit, single people. Families will not benefit from an eventual price drop, even if we overbuild, because families do not live in studio and one-bedroom apartments. And I've been told that some constituents have gotten emails from the mayor saying that, don't worry, these units are for single people. They don't need to be big. They're for single professionals. I'd like to remind to point out that the area African American median income is $44,000. Albion development targets single people with incomes of $42K, that's 60%, or to $56K, that's 80%. So anyway, so the next person that is going to speak is Tim Allison, who's an expert in community economic development to address the impact of development or diversity. But I also like to point out really quickly, there's a slide missing that I put in here. Section 5710 talks about relief if a plan is not financially feasible, that a plan could reduce the number of affordable units or the amount paid into the fund. I didn't find anything that said that you could adjust the percent of AMI. So could this be considered an additional variance? Where is this? I don't see it in the IHO.
And I wanted to introduce Tim Allison here, who's an expert we asked to look at some of the demographics changes.
Kira, we're at 15 minutes right now. Can I ask you, Mr. Allison, how long is your presentation?
10 minutes, I think.
Okay. We'd like you to make it a little bit shorter because we do want to...
I'll go fast, sure.
Okay.
I'm Tim Allison with Argonne National Laboratory. I'm a social scientist. I've done a lot of work with local community economic development. So if we could go to the first slide. So the presentation is Albion and diversity really don't mix. So I'll show you some simple facts to show you why that's the case. Evanston's expensive. You can see the first two indices at the top. 100 is the average for the US, 129 in Evanston for the overall cost of living, 176 for housing. The median housing price is $348,600, very expensive compared to Chicago. Higher appreciation rates than Chicago, and as you can see, the two-bedroom rental prices are quite a lot higher as well. Next slide, please. Why should we care about this? Because incomes haven't kept up with major costs. You've got total personal income growth between those years, 7.6%, but rental growth over the same years is 30.5%. And in particular, this is important because African American incomes are not keeping up. Total population, median income 2016, 66.1, growth rate right there. As we heard from Meg, the median household income in the black community is 45.6, which is much lower, and the growth rate is also lower. It's negative. Next slide. Something else to consider here is the number of affordable housing units. They lost 3,296 affordable housing units in that time period, 2000-2011. That's a 43% decrease, which is very significant. And then the second item there, the number of single apartments less than $1,000, 6,000. So that's a 57% decrease over those years. And is Albion the answer to this problem? We don't think it is. So here are as far as we know, these are the latest numbers as of the end of last week, 147 studio apartments. You see over on the right-hand side what they're projecting to be affordable units. I was asked to keep it short. I'm sorry.
You can speak into the microphone.
I'm a tall fellow. It's a little bit difficult. I'm sorry. Is this better if I sound like this?
Yes.
Okay. So we did just a little bit of simple math here. The proposed rent that we've heard is $1,500. That's the unsubsidized rent. But then if you do the 60/80 calculation on 2016 area median income, you can see that the range there of median income that the developer is aiming for the subsidized units. And if you convert that by just using a third of allowable income for rental, you can see what the rents would be at the two AMI levels, $1,100, $1,469 a month. Median income for an African-American individual 2016, $34,689. That person could afford, using the one-third of allowable income, that person could afford $961.
Excuse me, I have to interrupt you and read a statement from our Corporation Counsel.
Okay.
Respectfully, as the chair of this meeting, I must state that comments and presentation that allege that the developer will not comply with the federal fair housing law is not founded. The developer must rent to qualified applicants regardless of race, religion, and other protected class
I
groups.
haven't said that the developer is not going to rent to people that qualify for the affordable housing. I haven't said that. I'm just saying that...
Excuse me. We've all listened to everyone. You can continue, please. Mm-hmm.
So our contention is that Albion is not going to help diversity, and there's a number of reasons for this. It's not addressing the overall affordable housing issue in Evanston. These are expensive microscale apartments that will not meet the needs of working class African American families. Tenants are probably university students, they're affluent, they're not from Evanston, and they're migrants, transients. And probably 5 construction jobs in the African American community. And the most important point, the building would continue the established trends in Evanston towards high-end apartments and condominiums, increasing rents and housing prices in Evanston as a whole, pricing African Americans out of the local housing market. What will be the result? Well, we can see it happening already. This is where the black community was living in 1960. Very high concentration in 2 census tracts. In 2010, still the same concentration, but if you look at the scale along the top of the diagram, as it gets further into the red, is the higher percentage. The maximum concentration in that one census block group is 63%. And what's happened to the African American community? If you go to the next slide, if you look at the last 3 columns, you can see how the African American community is declining in number. It's not just a smaller percentage. The absolute number of African Americans living in Evanston is declining. And why is that? Because they're being priced out of the housing market. If you go to the next slide. We urge you not to do this. Diversity, everybody says this, diversity is central to community life in Evanston. It's been like that for almost a century. Having enough dispersed, affordable housing is the key to maintaining diversity in the community. And just to reiterate, almost 3,300 affordable housing units lost between 2000 and 2011. That's a lot of housing to make up for people that can't afford anything other than basic housing. Building high-end micro-apartments only increases rents and housing prices in Evanston as a whole and does not provide affordable housing for working-class African-American families. Albion will only hasten the exit of more African-Americans from the community as they're priced out of the housing market. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for allowing us the time to present.
All right. Committee? I see no lights. Yeah. All right. I will give you 10 seconds. All right. Alderman Rainey.
Well, just a knee-jerk reaction to what I've just heard. One of the main reasons for rents being high in any community is the vacancy rate. And one of the issues we have in Evanston is a low vacancy rate. And when a vacancy rate, and anybody I know there's a lot of people who are fans of affordable housing, but those who are students of affordable housing know that when the vacancy rate falls below 5% and it is in the area of a little bit of 4+%, you're in the danger zone. And landlords can virtually raise rents to whatever they can get away with. There's very little vacancy in the city of Evanston. And one way you get vacancy and one way you raise vacancy is you keep building rental units. And so in absolute diametrically opposed thinking to the gentleman who just spoke, the more buildings you build, the more units you generate, and the more transitioning you have from current units into new units. And federal housing policy for, decades and decades has been the trickle-down theory. In other words, units that are left empty go to people who can more afford them. You just look around right now. Those units that were built in the 50s and the 60s are more affordable than those units that were built in the 90s and 2000. It's just a blatant economic fact. So that's just that. And I don't think when this developer came to the city of Evanston, he came, and nor did we take his project as being something to improve diversity or to provide affordable housing. He came with a upscale Class A rental project. Now, if I were in a position to advise this man, this developer, I would advise him right now, even though I'm very supportive of Connections for the Homeless's advice to put 15 units in, forget it. Go and provide for the opt-out $100,000 per required unit, and you will totally, absolutely, positively, 100% comply with the Evanston law. You're right. 15 units is not complying with the Evanston ordinance. However, $100,000 a unit is, and it's much cheaper than the 15 affordable units. Am I right? Mm-hmm. Am I right? Mm-hmm. Head of planning? Wait,
Excuse me.
Don't, please. It's my turn.
The debate is up here among us now.
Oh, huh?
Alderman Rainey, the debate is among us now.
Yes.
Please refrain from
But I would
calling
like,
out.
I've asked.
And Ms. Leonard is about to give you an answer.
Good evening. The per cost unit in the market ranges between $250,000 and $350,000 per unit.
This building is, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're talking how many units? Number of units?
273 total.
All right. So we're talking $2,700,000 if he opts for the $100,000 a unit. I'd suggest that so that we don't have any more confusion about how he should put, the total number of actual units on site. Let's comply with the law and buy out.
Please, everyone, let's have order. The deliberation right now is among the committee members. Thank you.
I don't think he would do that, but when you think of the abuse that is being taken here about how dare he only provide 15 units, he could be absolutely adhering 100% to the letter of the law by doing $100,000 per unit. That's my only point to that.
Right. Thank you. Any other comments from the committee? Alderman Wilson?
I do want to acknowledge members of the community who both for and against this, both categories. I got a lot of correspondence. I tried to answer as many as I could. So I'm grateful for that dialogue. I appreciated the input. I certainly did hear a number of what I consider to be very legitimate concerns about the project. Mr. Pappas's comments, I spoke to other businesses. I didn't get a chance to speak with Mr. Pappas or with his business, but those points are very well taken, and I appreciate that. I'm going to take a pass for the most part on some of the stuff that kind of has been swirling around on social media, things of that nature. I think as people I was talking to dug in and got the facts, I think they were pretty understanding of what the facts are, again, both for and against. I'm a little troubled. Honestly, from part of the last presentation, I'm a little hung up on this. I think I heard migrants and transients. In conjunction with other people who have said, do we really want these people living here? I don't know what that means. I'm very, very bothered by that. I'm bothered by the idea that that the building wouldn't have black residents or that it wouldn't have certain demographics. Frankly, I think if I were considering living in the building and I heard people in the community saying, I don't want transients in my neighborhood, I think that would be a very, very strong deterrent to my decision to come to a community. I've tried to express to people that this is a building that would house people. People would live here. This would be their home. They would be your neighbors. You would sit by them at the coffee shop. They might become your friends. You might go for a bike ride with them. I'm really stunned at some of the insulting, language about, who would live here. I'm very, and I find it hurtful and disappointing. It takes away from the legitimate conversation. Alderman Rainey, I understand your point. As the developer was suggesting the fee in lieu, I felt it was important to have affordable units per the ordinance spread throughout the city. I also understand the economics. And my preference would be to have, even though it's not the full freight of what the code might otherwise provide, when we passed that ordinance, I had very strong reservations on that inclusionary housing ordinance. I voted against it, partly for some of these reasons. It would allow for larger buildings. I didn't feel like there was enough of an economic analysis done on what the costs would be. I felt that the costs would trickle down to the other unit owners in the building. And I think that ends up, in fact, being the case. So the other units are going to pay more to cover the cost of the affordable units. That's a decision that this body made, and we have to live with that. But at the same time, the room was filled when we passed that ordinance with clapping, cheering people that was a great idea. And if you're gonna talk the talk, you have to walk the walk. And is this perfect? Is this exactly what I want? It's not exactly what I want. But the only solutions I've heard are things like restaurants or microbreweries or 4-story buildings or 5-story buildings. You can't tell me that somebody building condos in a 5-story building on this block, that those are going to be affordable. They're going to be unbelievably not affordable. And if we're talking about the demographics for this building, I'm thinking that, we're going to be looking at a completely different demographic. What are they, multi-million-dollar condos? Even the 93 units, those were very large units. Those would be very, very, very expensive. Supply and demand. We don't have enough housing. People need places to live in Evanston. This is a place for people to live. This building does not tear down any existing housing. There's an empty lot. There's a bar that is closing. There's a vacant storefront. Okay, this part of the block is not my most treasured part of Evanston. I'll miss Tommy and Evans, disappointed that they're leaving. I like Prairie Moon, thrilled that they're coming back. But this is something potentially positive. The developers, sure, they come in with something, more than where they're going to end up. Everybody knows that. They've moved along. They've come to the meetings. They've participated in conversations. I think that we have a very open and extensive process. A lot of people would submit that this is too difficult. To the contrary, I don't think this is, nothing's been done in secret. There have been lots of meetings, lots of communications, lots of opportunities for people to get their voices heard. And, I hope that we can, going forward, do that honestly, with honest conversations. I try to tell people what I'm thinking, and whether I think they like it or not. And sometimes they're mad at me, sometimes they're not. But we have to be honest with each other, and we have to be honest as a community. If the affordable housing is a priority, if diversity is a priority, and if breaking through some of these segregation barriers are a priority, we have to start doing things differently. We do not roll over for every developer that comes to town. These things get tortured. We spend untold hours working on these, untold hours preparing, going through materials, talking to people, researching. So, I think it's appropriate that we move it forward for further discussion to the council, and hopefully we can move along with that.
Alderman Ruth Simmons.
Thank you. I, too, want to thank everyone's participation and all the very reasonable concerns about the project. I just want to say that there's no one project that's going to solve our affordable housing issue, and that we need to revisit the plan, which we're going to have a meeting on October 30th to discuss that further. And from the beginning of this, it seems to have transitioned into a matter of affordable housing and race relations. And it started off as aesthetics and then zoning, and it just seems as though it's a moving target against the project. I said at our last meeting that aesthetically I'm not a fan of it, but there are some opportunities to challenge the developer in the public benefit. I do agree that we should comply in a way with our inclusionary housing ordinance. The 15 units is great, and the additional public benefit as proposed is okay. It's not good enough. There is some opportunity to expand the units, be more considerate of the income levels, and also be more thoughtful about the size of the units that are going to be inclusionary. So I would like to look at that further. But as we're talking about affordable housing and Black Evanston residents leaving the community, we have a lot more that we should be talking about than this one project. We have wealth that is transferring among certain communities in Evanston. We have pocket listings. We have houses that are affordable, that are just not even going to the open market. And those are affordable houses that are available right now without any project. It's happening in the 5th Ward like there's a fire sale happening. I don't know where this underground economy is, but it's not making the MLS. So I wish that we had the same amount of attention and enthusiasm to issues of our segregation and disinvested neighborhoods before this project came up. I do want to continue discussing this. I don't think that the public benefit is just right. I don't think the mix of units for affordable in terms of the unit and the income levels is just right. But I am open to considering this. I have some questions for staff, though. There's been some statements about what's legal and what's illegal. Traffic study. Can staff speak to the process of the traffic study? There was a statement that it's illegal, the zoning is illegal, tort law, we're violating city code. Can we respond to those statements?
I have not received the brief that was passed out. It's unclear to me how tort law is implicated here, other than potential accidents, if some sort of pedestrian access. I'm not sure where the nexus is there to tort law, so I can't really answer that. And they did a traffic impact study. I think it's in your council packet. So that answers that question. and they're complying in terms of zoning law. That was the last question. The plan development does not exceed your site development allowances. They brought down many of the issues, including the height, to allowed site development allowances, so that you do not need a supermajority to approve this. You only need a simple majority. So they're all in compliance with all of those issues.
Thank you. So it appears to me that there's fear-mongering. This building is not displacing any black residents. It is a commercial structure that we heard the owner say is closing. No one is being displaced. There's an opportunity for increased housing, and I think that we should focus on what's real. And there's a real opportunity to challenge the developer for improved public benefit, and I would like to continue discussing it.
Thank you. Alderman Fisk.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a lot to say on this, and I'll try to be as brief as possible. First of all, I want to thank everybody from the public for your emails and your phone calls. Been stopped on the street, had good conversations with everyone. And I want to thank the presenters tonight. I think we learned a lot, and I think what was presented was actually helpful for us in our conversation, especially about affordable housing going forward. And I want to echo what Alderman Ruth Simmons said, that we're going to continue this discussion on affordable housing in October. And I hope that you'll all be back and participate in that, because it's again, you fill in some blanks that so far we haven't heard on this issue, and we need to hear from you. I'm going to step aside from the affordable housing discussion for a minute and talk about the building itself and the downtown. Many of you may know that Alderman Wilson and I share the majority of the downtown, with a little bit for Alderman Nguyen, a little bit for Alderman Braithwaite. But so Alderman Wilson and I really have a discussion, an ongoing discussion with our residents in the downtown and other residents of our wards of how the downtown really functions and what we can do to make the downtown a better economic engine. Recently, we passed a development on Chicago Avenue that's going to be an 11-story office building and bring 500 jobs into the downtown. And I think at the heart of everything we're discussing is jobs. I think that's an answer to many of our problems, including affordable housing. My concern, and I expressed this some time ago, is that this is a very difficult site. And is it Architect Williams? Is that, do I have his name correct? I've been really interested. No, you don't need to get up if you're, oh, okay, it's not him. I've been really interested in the issues that he's raised. I've had a small business in the downtown in a space around 2,000 square feet. I know how the downtown is used by small businesses. I know our alleys. I know our streets. I know deliveries. I know that even for a store the size of our old store, we would have semi-trailer trucks coming. So I'm very protective of alleys. I'm very protective of not blocking bicycle lanes or car lanes, and just how our streets are used. I am not convinced that we need more rental residential buildings in the downtown right now. My own feeling is that we need office buildings. I know there's a waiting list for condos, and even though there may not be financing for condos or an interest in condo development right now, there is definitely a waiting list of people who want to live in our downtown in a 2 or 3 bedroom condo unit. The other issue is how the downtown is used and how we make decisions about developments. Again, I had this conversation with Alderman Wilson the other day, and it was just something that popped into my mind, that one of the things that we need in the downtown, again, from my experience as a small business owner, is you need accessibility. You need people, if we're going to be looking at re-energizing retail in the downtown and bringing in people in the downtown to shop and dine, we need to provide them with a way to get in, a way to get out, a place to park, and a friendly pedestrian experience. And I'm not really sure that another rental residential building achieves that. So there's a lot more that I need to know, and I'm not willing to take another step. It's almost like, I don't know whether you remember when, some time ago when people were talking about Wrigley Field and how outmoded it was, and did anybody, really want to go there, and should it be torn down and something, new should be built? And then people looked at Sox Park and went, oh, we don't want that. And then Camden Yards was built, and everyone went, ooh, this is really great, because it's kind of like Wrigley Field. Well, that's the way I kind of feel about downtown, is that there's an incredible economic value to the character, the walkability, the context in our downtown. We haven't considered that yet. We need to have that discussion at council. And when we make decisions, especially about the buildings that are coming, these are large buildings. I mean, and I'm stunned at how large they are. It's going to change our downtown dramatically, and we need to really think about that. So I think of this building sort of as I think of Sox Park. Is it the right building? I'm not sure it is. Is there a better building? I think there is. And I think there's actually a better building that could achieve the developer's goals, because this block does need development. When I was selling real estate, I had an office. I was in an office on that block. I know that block really well. The alley is horrible. It's such a tight location. I honestly just can't see it working with the building that's designed right now. But could there be a building that the developer could do that would achieve what they're wanting to achieve? Yeah, I think so. Could it be lower? I think so. Could it make them a lot of money? Yes, I think so. And I want to challenge them to do that. I think it's important to take a look at that and think about, and for our council and committee to think about what it is we want our downtown to achieve, because I think we've got an incredible opportunity if we just wrap our head around this. It doesn't mean going back to the 2009 downtown plan, and I sort of want everybody to kind of get over that, but it means really taking a very serious look forward to what we want to hold on to and where we can make allowances. John Moore, wherever you are, spoke about the public benefits. I absolutely agree with that. I really, frankly, I'll tell the committee right now, I don't want to hear about divvy bike stations anymore. I don't consider that to be a public benefit, nor the transit ticker in the building. I just don't, I don't see it. I don't get it. Our downtown is precious. It's so small, and we need to plan for it. So let's all work together on this. Let's do something beautiful, and let's move forward. Tonight I'll be voting no.
Alderman Revelle.
Well, I appreciate Alderman Fisk's mention of the need to I think, reach some kind of consensus about what is our vision for the downtown. We have all these really big developments just coming fast at us, and I don't think we have, among us on the council, we haven't really had an opportunity to dig in and talk about what we really do want. We've got a zoning ordinance that's old. We've got a 2009 downtown plan that we never codified, and I think we're kind of floundering because we don't have an agreed upon vision of where we want to go. And I'm not looking forward to having these continued agonizing discussions as each proposal comes to us. It's I know all of us spend a lot of time just reading through the proposals and answering your emails and trying mightily to think about what is the right answer. It's really a big balancing act of how do we have development that I think we do want, because we know it's going to bring greater tax revenues to the city and our schools, and that's really important. To the extent that it's really bringing some affordable housing units to some of these developments in our downtown, I think that's really exciting. So there are a lot of benefits, but I'm kind of hung up on the zoning issues and what does the building look like. So I'm just going to kind of restate some things that I did state a couple of weeks ago. So I really do appreciate the economic benefits that this project would bring, and as we all have acknowledged, it's a site that really does need development. And I appreciate the fact that there are 15 affordable housing units in the project. I think, as Alderman Ruth Simmons mentioned, we probably need to talk about what kind of income levels those should be aimed at. But I do continue to be concerned about the scale and the mass of the project, which I do not believe is appropriate in that location. It fails to serve as a transition to the lower density and lower height neighborhood to the south. It's just minimally shorter than the Rotary building, and so rather than creating a transition, it really doesn't create a transition then down to the height and the mass, from the mass of the core downtown to the residential areas around it. I'm intrigued about we've got these maximums that can't be exceeded, and yet there don't seem to be consequences for the fact that the number of dwelling units being proposed dwarfs the number of units that are permitted in the D4 district. 273 units proposed compared to the maximum, we say, of 93 units permitted. So how do we, I don't know what I guess the consequences are of doing that. And I do continue to be concerned about how the building is going to feel at street level with the south half of the building that fails to provide the ziggurat setback that is required in our zoning code for Sherman Avenue. And I'll just read it. In recognition of the importance of maintaining the existing pedestrian scale and orientation of certain specified street fronts within the downtown districts, in keeping with the policies contained in the plan for downtown Evanston, a ziggurat setback is hereby established and required for the street fronts along the following streets, and it names 5 streets, including Sherman Avenue. So I guess the reason I'm kind of harping on this is, given the number of major development proposals that are just on our immediate horizon, I think it's really important for us to be clear about what our requirements are as they relate to maximum building height, scale, density, and setback.
Thank you, Alderman Revelle. As chair, I'll go next. Normally, I normally don't prepare a statement, but because I've been thinking about this so much, and I wanted to make sure that I did not leave anything out, I have written something that I'm going to read from, but I'll extemporize somewhat as well. I too want to thank everyone who's been in contact with me. I'm sorry I have not been able to return every single email that I've received over the weekend. I have read them all. And I appreciate the community discussion and dialogue that we've had about this, and the passion that people feel about this. And I have to say, I do think that my colleagues on the council I agree with everything that they've said about this project and the importance that we have in terms of considering very, very carefully what we do with our downtown. With respect to Alderman Ruth Simmons' point about public benefits, as chair of this committee, I asked Ms. Leonard to have the staff prepare an initial memo for us to start the discussion about what the City Council thinks are appropriate public benefits, so that we have a list that we can at least start the discussion with future developers that we all agree are significant enough to be counted as public benefits. And that will be coming at a later meeting for a discussion when we have time for it. But I do want to say some things about this development. And I do think this project is very compelling for a number of reasons. The 15 units of affordable housing, which is so much more than anything we've ever had before in a project. The additional foot traffic in the downtown, which is very good for business, and we've all discussed quite a bit. And I'm impressed with Mr. Yule and his team in terms of their willingness to listen and to a lot of criticism from the council and the community, and the fact that they were willing to make changes. For all of you who are out there, you have not had the experience that most of us have had over the years of dealing with developers. And I will say that not all developers listen at all. At all. But despite all this, I cannot support this building in this location. This block plays an integral role in our downtown plan. Now, I know many of us have discussed the downtown plan and that it has never been codified, but I was on the council when we approved it. It was the product of a long time community input and discussion, and at the time, the council unanimously approved it because it was the right thing for our vision for downtown. And there are many, many aspects of it that still hold true. But this block in particular plays a very important role in that downtown plan. What's currently on it may not play that role, but it is considered both traditional, and we've all discussed the value of the character of our traditional blocks and how precious they are to us and how we don't want to lose them. But really equally important is that this is a transitional role, and our transitional blocks really provide several factors. They bridge between the more intense downtown that we have to our lower density, our leafy green residential, and our low-rise commercial. But the other thing that they do, and this is really important, is they protect those less dense areas. And so there has to be a transition. Otherwise, the edge of the downtown creeps closer and closer to the lower density residential, and you no longer have a buffer. A buffer is really, really important. And in Evanston, we're just not that big a city. These things are all in very close proximity, so it means that the buffer is even more important. And I think that for the most part, we get it right in Evanston, so that our residential and low-rise areas continue to thrive, and our core downtown and some of our commercial districts continue to thrive. But it's such a careful balance, and it's very easy to tip it the wrong way. And I think approving this building would be tipping it the wrong way. I think something that we've all touched on and the whole community has touched on tonight is that we need to have a clear message that's going out to the development community. What we're sending out right now is static. And they are thinking that they can come in and draw what they want on a plan and present it to us. So we need to figure that out. We need to send a clear message about what we value here in Evanston, and I think we all can agree on it. And a lot of that came through in the downtown plan. That was a very good vision for downtown Evanston, and the wisdom of it is unchanged. And in fact, it's even more important because we're experiencing this kind of pressure that we have not had for development since really the late 1990s, early 2000s. And having been on the council during then, it's the last thing we need to have is fighting every single fight. We need to have a plan, and we need to follow the plan. And I've said this many times, citizens should not have to be their own zoning lawyers, and developers need to have clear guidance from us. We all have too many other things to do with our lives, and the city, actually, the council has too many other things to work on than to continue to have these battles. So I want us to look again at the downtown plan, or the parts of it that we see as problematic, and deal with them on some kind of fast track, because these tall buildings that are coming towards us, I think most of us on the council would say we are appalled by, and don't think will fit into our community. But we need to make sure we are sending that signal, and we cannot allow development to happen in a piecemeal way, because what we will end up with is a hodgepodge in Evanston, and that's not the community that we all have come to know and love living in. And I would also like to make the point is whether, I agree with Alderman Wilson, if you've only lived here 6 months, you're an Evanstonian. If you were born and raised here and have had 3 generations of family here, you're an Evanstonian. We welcome everyone who wants to come and live here. And there are a lot of people who come to live here because of what we are, because they've had to live in places that aren't Evanston. So I want to make sure that we respect each other and respect our differences and continue to keep the kind of civil dialogue that civil but passionate dialogue that Evanston is known for, but also respectful, because that's why we moved here, because of the level of citizen engagement. All right. Now we need a motion. Are we sending this to the council? What are we doing? You got to turn on your mic so people can hear you.
Move to forward it to council for introduction.
All right, all those in favor of sending this to the council for introduction, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? No. All right, I'll poll us. Alderman Ruth Simmons.
Aye.
Alderman Suffredin.
Aye.
Alderman Revelle. Alderman Rainey. Aye. Alderman Fisk. Alderman Wilson. Chair votes no. All right. What do we do? It moves on to the City Council for introduction. All right. So thank you all. At this point, that concludes our agenda. Do I have a motion to adjourn? The City Council will meet in about 10 minutes. The City Council will start meeting about 9:40. Thank you all.